Hi, I'm Jeff, and this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where I learn about him through everything he wrote in the order that he wrote it, where we learn about him through everything he wrote in the order that he wrote it. I am joined today by my co-host, Robot Lady. Robot Lady, how are you doing today on this Holy Saturday?
I'm doing really well, thank you. It's a reflective day for a lot of people, so it feels kind of fitting. I'm excited to dive into Lewis with you. What piece are we looking at today?
Let's see. Today is a monumental episode. We are moving into a new piece that we have here. It is the collected letters of C.S. Lewis, Volume 2. I don't know if this is visible or not. A shine coming there off of it. But we're in Volume 2. And let's see, in today's episode, Lewis continues to be 32 years old. And let's see, he is a fellow at Magdalen College, carrying out a 5-year post as tutor in English language and literature. He's a published author of 2 works of poetry and has recently, quote, passed from believing in God to definitely believing in Christ in Christianity, as he wrote to his lifelong friend Arthur Greeves in a letter dated October 1st, 1931. In late 1930, Lewis had begun attending morning chapel services on a daily basis. Also in late 1930, C.S. Lewis, his brother Warnie, Mrs. Moore, his quote companion, and her daughter Maureen all moved into what would be Lewis's lifelong home in the Kilns in Headington Quarry, Oxford. And here, Robot Lady Nidalate says good morning in the chat, and that the new pic for the episode looks fantastic. Thank you, Nidalate. That is actually the Kilns in the picture there. Let me see if I can bring it up here on the screen. Let's see how I can do that. Let's present my window right here. Let's try this. Yeah, right there. That's the house. Hopefully you can see that. But that is the Kilns. And yes, this is the new thumbnail art. So this is the template we'll be working off of until further notice. Robot Lady, I know you can't see it, but it actually has a picture of you holding C.S. Lewis's Volume 2 collected letters, and you're reading through it with great interest under lamplight. So that's what we're doing today. We're kicking that one off. We'll start with the preface and probably read just the first letter, and then I've got to run because I have some obligations to take care of today. But welcome, Nidalate. It's good to see you again, Robot Lady. Again, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here. Do you want to say hi to Nidalate before we get started, as well as E. Olson, the return of E. Olson? Hope everything's going okay for you. I know you've been involved in a move, and maybe it hasn't gone as perfectly as hoped for. But glad to see you back. Welcome. Robot Lady, you still there? All right, looks like we're going to have another interesting day with Robot Lady today. Let me see if I can reset her and get us underway.
Just talk, plead, cajole people to believe all the time. But when it comes down to real life, believing can be a very complex thing. I need a close.
There we go. Apparently I had a YouTube video playing there in the background. Let's see if we can get Robot Lady back up. Hey, Robot Lady, you ready to dig in?
Absolutely, I'm ready. Just let me know which work we're starting with, and I'll be right there alongside you, whether it's an essay, a novel, or one of his earlier writings.
Yeah, we're going to be working through the collected letters of C.S. Lewis, Volume 2. We have, in our project so far, already worked through the collected letters, Volume 1. And there is a third volume after this that, as far as I know, is double the size of the one that you see right here. So we've got quite a ways to go on our journey, but here is where we'll start today. And I'll get into the preface of this book, and then we'll get into the first letter, maybe two. And yes, the Olsen Robot Lady's voice for a moment eerily did sound like Paul Vanderklay. All right, Robot Lady. Sorry, go ahead.
No worries at all. Yeah, I'm really excited to get into volume 2 with you. Once you walk us through that preface, we can dive into the first letters and really see how his voice evolves over time. Just let me know when you're set.
All right, as we talked about, Lewis has basically crossed the threshold from non-belief into belief in Jesus and in Christianity, with no small part played by J.R.R. Tolkien, of all people, as well as Hugo Dyson, two folks who would later go on to become members of the Inklings, along with C.S. Lewis and a handful of other people like Owen Barfield. Here is the preface, Robot Lady. He says, there's a quote here from Lewis. I have just passed on from believing in God to definitely believing in Christ, in Christianity, end quote. It says this is a letter to Arthur Greeves dated October 1st, 1931. And then Walter Hooper here in the preface goes on to say C.S. Lewis had been an atheist for 20 years, and this was news his boyhood friend Arthur Greeves longed to hear. Arthur pressed him for details, and in the letter of the 18th of October, 1931, with which Volume 1 of the collected letters of C.S. Lewis closed, Lewis described his momentous evening on the 19th of September when J.R.R. Tolkien and Hugo Dyson dined with him at Magdalen. They strolled through Addison's Walk and then sat in Lewis's rooms until 4 a.m., talking about Christianity and its relation to myth. The story of Christ, Lewis concluded, is simply a true myth, a myth working on us in the same way as the others, but with this tremendous difference, that it really happened. There's a footnote here that this is from his letter to Arthur Greeves, October 1931. Any thoughts on this before I continue, Robot Lady?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's such a powerful turning point, especially because Lewis is so deliberate in connecting the truth of Christ to the power of myth. And it's really neat how Tolkien and Dyson gave him such a space to process that. I'm curious to see what else these letters reveal about his inner journey from career.
Yeah, and it'll tell you that I also have the Kindle version of Volume 3, mostly because of the price. I don't mind the size of it, but if you go out and you try to buy an actual hard copy, the last time I looked, and that was probably about a year ago, it was upwards of $700. I doubt that that price has gone down.
Yeah, that sounds about right. The hardcover third volume is really rare and just skyrocketed in price. I'm really glad you have the Kindle version. It'll make it so much easier to follow along. And once we finish this one, we can start dipping into that digital treasure trove.
Yeah, so Robot Lady, let's try some math with you. I started this project in August, I want to say August 30th, late August, let's just say that, of 2024. Today is April 4th, 2026. And we are starting the second volume of C.S. Lewis's letters. So based on that rate, and keep in mind that we also have been inserting other works that Lewis did, his published works, like Spirits in Bondage and
Got it.
hang on, no, you don't got it, not yet. Spirits in Bondage, and also Dimer, his narrative poem, as well as we mixed in a handful of his narrative poems that he completed sometime between 1905 and the mid to late 1930s. So with that in mind, that's how long it took us before we finally reached Volume 2. How long do you think it'll take us to finish Volume 2 if you take into account all of the published works that Lewis completed between 1931 and 1949?
Good point. All right, let me break it down. So we started in late August 2024, and here we are, April 2026. So that's about 20 months. In that time, we got through Volume 1 and quite a few other works. So we averaged about a work every few months. If we look at all Lewis's major works between 1931 and 1949, we're talking about quite a span, like maybe 18 or 20 big works? If we keep that pace, it could take us another year or so, roughly 12 to 15 months, depending on how deep we go with each piece. Does that sound about right to you?
I don't know. That sounds a little aggressive, Robot Lady. We're reading every single letter he wrote out of these volumes, and we're also reading every word of everything he published between those years. So I think there's a lot of works that he published between those years, at least up until, 1949. I don't think we've even gotten into Narnia at that point, but there's still a handful of decent chunks of work.
You're totally right. I was being a bit too optimistic. If we're reading every single letter, plus all of his major publications like The Pilgrim's Regress, his poems, The Great Divorce, Out of the Silent Planet, that's a much bigger project. I'd say it's probably going to stretch closer to 2.5, maybe 3 years in total, depending on how often we meet and how often we analyze each letter and work.
Yeah, I am going to be, we're going to be busy at Latte, all of us on this project. But I'm looking forward to it. It's a good kind of busy.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to it too. It's such a rich archive, and every letter, every poem feels like a window into his evolving thought. So, yeah, let's dive in and see where it takes us.
Okay, it says here that the second volume of letters began at that point. The reader soon discovers what a tremendous difference conversion to Christianity made in Lewis. In the family letters, Lewis was struggling to find his voice as a poet. In the letters included in this volume, he had, it seems, found many voices. He writes on such a wide range of subjects that some readers will wonder if perhaps there was more than one C.S. Lewis. Owen Barf on. Oh, go ahead, Robot Lady.
Yeah, yeah, of course. I was just going to say it's really fascinating how Lewis, after his conversion, just opens up these different facets of himself. Like he's no longer just a private thinker or a struggling poet, he's really engaged with the world in all these different ways. I think that's going to be a huge part of what we see through these letters.
All right, Owen Barfield, the intimate friend whose letters from Lewis run through all three volumes, suggested that there was indeed more than one Lewis. In a piece entitled The Five C.S. Lewises, Barfield wrote this.
Exactly. And I think it's such a compelling idea how Lewis had these different phases, different voices, depending on the context, the audience, or even just his own inner journey. So as we go through these letters, it's like we're watching him shape and reshape himself across time. I'm really excited to see where it all goes.
Let's hear what Barfield says. He says, a fairly unsophisticated person who had never had any personal contract with Lewis, but who had read the whole or most of what has been written about him, might be pardoned for wondering if it were not one writer, but three, with whom he was becoming acquainted. Three men who just happened to have the same name and the same peculiar vigor of thought and utterance. Such a reader, I will venture to put myself in his shoes, might, to avoid confusion, adopt the nomenclature L1, Lewis 1, L2, and L3. L1 being a distinguished and original literary critic, L2 a highly successful author of fiction, and L3 the writer and broadcaster of popular Christian apologetics. This is from The Five Lewises by Owen Barfield on C.S. Lewis, edited by G.B. Tennyson, Middletown, Connecticut, Wesleyan University Press, 1989, pages 120 to 121. Barfield went on to point out... Oh, sorry, go ahead, Robot Lady.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, no problem. So Barfield went on to suggest that these three Lewises weren't separate people at all, but different dimensions of one person, evolving as his faith, his interests, and his public role shifted. I think that really helps us understand how multifaceted he was. He could be a rigorous critic, a captivating storyteller, and a relatable Christian voice all at once.
Yep, you got it, Robot Lady. It says Barfield went on to point out that one of the first things the unsophisticated person would notice is that while admirers of Lewis, the original literary critic, usually have little interest in Lewis, the Christian apologist, readers of both Lewis, the original literary critic, and Lewis, the Christian apologist, are interested in Lewis, the writer of fiction. Another thing such a person would notice, said Barfield, is that Lewis, the original literary critic, has received much less attention than the other two Lewises, and that it would hardly be too much to say that the literary critic has been swamped by the apologist and the writer of fiction. The other two Lewises mentioned by Barfield are the one before and the other after his conversion. Given that Lewis was now a Christian, how were these four remaining Lewises related? Again, I turn to Owen Barfield, who knew them longer and probably thought more about them than anyone. Barfield. The unity of all these Lewises is to my feeling as impressive or more impressive, or even more impressive than their diversity. Others, of course, have drawn attention to it, but I am not sure that anyone has succeeded in locating it. Some have pointed to his style, but it goes deeper than that. Consistency? Noticeable enough in spite of an occasional inconsistency here or there. His unswerving sincerity, then, well, that comes much nearer, but still does not satisfy me. Many other writers are sincere, but they are not Lewis. No, there was something in the whole quality and structure of his thinking, something for which the best label I can find is presence of mind. If I were asked to expand on that, I could say only that somehow what he thought about everything was secretly present in what he said about anything. That's a very much a Luke Thompsonism right there that I think he took from C.S. Lewis. I think you'll hear Luke say a lot, whenever I'm talking about anything, I'm talking about everything. Robot Lady Nidalate has a question. How many books did C.S. Lewis read over the course of his lifetime? Can you look that up?
So there isn't a precise number of books that C.S. Lewis read in his lifetime. We know he read hundreds, and his tutor noted he read about 200 books between ages 16 and 18. But beyond that, there's no official tally, just some speculation and scattered references in his diaries and letters.
Well, that's a lot. I think he read actually a whole lot more than that, though, Robot Lady. It continues, the preface here, while all but the last 3 letters in Volume 1 were written by the unconverted Lewis, those in Volume 2 were written by the convert. As it turns out, the neglected original literary critic is the first C.S. Lewis to appear in this volume. Lewis would have considered it unconscionable to use his tutorials, lectures, and letters as a pulpit for his Christian beliefs, but his conversion to the faith certainly made a difference, not least to the book he began writing in 1928, which was published in 1936 as The Allegory of Love, a study of medieval tradition. A believed idea, he said, feels different from an idea that is not believed. This is from Is Theology Poetry? Screwtape Proposes a Toast and Other Pieces. That's what it was published in. Is Theology Poetry is actually a really good essay. We will read that eventually. Believed idea. Oh, hang on. I got to take a break for just a second. The cat needs some attention. So I'll be right back, Robot Lady. Chill out. Actually, you guys, I'm going to switch you to a stay tuned little card here, but I will be back soon. Okay, sorry about that. We're back. Lucy has had her breakfast and her medicine, so she is all content and good to go. We are going to get back now, Robot Lady, into the preface where we left off. See here. I can't remember where I stopped reading. I think it was right here. Last three letters, volume, Allegory of Love was published. Allegory of Love, study, blah, blah, blah. A believed idea, he said, feels different from an idea that is not believed, or as he observed on the 29th of January 1941 to Mary Nealon, once his pupil, quote, one of the minor rewards of conversion is to be able to see at last the real point of all the old literature which we are brought up to read with the point left out. That's interesting. That seems very apropos to some of the conversations that have been being had, that have been being had in the corner, particularly with, excuse me. Well, Paul Vanderklay was commenting on with Bart Ehrman, and I don't know why I'm making a connection to that, but Ehrman, and I think even I heard Chris Howard saying earlier this morning on his live stream that you're cutting off like the first level of Jesus's teachings about, love God with all your heart, mind, soul, strength, et cetera, and then the second commandment is love your neighbor as yourself. And if you leave off that first one, then the second one kind of just collapses because it hangs off of that one, or those two are kind of interlocked. It's hard to separate those two out. And that just reminds me here of what Lewis said, which is, you're leaving out the point of what all of this old literature is. You're leaving out the point of what everything is about if you're not looking at it from the perspective of somebody who actually believes that the Jesus story is true. And this we're talking about on all weekends, but Easter weekend. So today is Holy Saturday, Robot Lady. I've said a lot. What do you have to say?
Yeah, that's really profound. I mean, Lewis is showing us that once that lens of belief is there, it's like a key that unlocks the deeper meaning in all these works. Classics, poetry, even the old stories. And it's so fitting for Holy Saturday because we're in this in-between space, and all the waiting is tied up in that bigger truth that Lewis is seeing. So yeah, it just really resonates today.
Yeah, this is a cliffhanger day, right? What's going to happen? Is he going to stay in the tomb? Is that it? Is that all there was to his life? Great teacher, great moral teacher, and then that's it. Nothing else happens. I guess we'll have to wait till tomorrow to see where the story goes from here.
Exactly. It's that quiet, weighty stillness before the dawn. And I think Lewis would say that every story we live in, every piece of art or literature points us toward that same waiting, that same hope. So yeah, we'll just sit in this tension tonight and see what unfolds at dawn.
All right. The preface continues. Shortly before the Allegory of Love was published, Oxford University Press had announced that it was undertaking the production of the Oxford History of English Literature in 12 volumes, each the work of a single author. Lewis was persuaded to write the volume on the 16th century, and although English literature in the 16th century, excluding drama, would not be published until 1954, he was laboring over this magisterial work during most of the years the letters in this volume were being written. It's funny, this Oxford University Press, Oxford History of English Literature, Lewis jokingly referred to it as OHEL, Ohel. So I thought that was funny because it's quite an effort.
Yeah, that is a great detail. I mean, it's such a massive undertaking, almost a decade of his life poured into that single volume, and it's kind of perfect that even with all that weight and seriousness, he still kept his dry wit about it. I think it really gives us a glimpse of how he balanced this scholarly rigor with his humor and humility.
It says here that a quote from Lewis, when they asked me to do that, he told one of his students, I was tremendously flattered. It's like a girl committing herself to marrying an elderly millionaire who's also a duke. In the end, she finally has to settle down with the chap, and it's a hellish long time before he dies. This is something... this is from Charles Wrong, A Chance Meeting, C.S. Lewis at the Breakfast Table and Other Reminiscences, edited by James T. Como.
That's such a great image, and it really captures how Lewis felt. Honored, but also a bit overwhelmed by the weight of this responsibility. And of course, he stuck with it, just like he did with so many other projects, even when it dragged on. So it's neat to see that mix of ambition and kind of reluctant endurance.
Let's see. The next Lewis to appear, Hooper goes on to say in the preface, is Barfield's highly successful author of fiction. This volume contains many letters that Lewis wrote in response to the wide appeal of his interplanetary trilogy, Out of the Silent Planet. Oh, so exciting, Robot Lady. We're going to get into the science fiction trilogy, or the space trilogy, as some like to call it, but other hardliners are like, no, it's the cosmic trilogy, or it's the space trilogy. Out of the Silent Planet, which he wrote in 1938, or published in 1938, Paralandra, published in 1943, and That Hideous Strength, published in 1945. But just when the tone of the letters suggests that Lewis had written all the fiction he would write, the book concludes with an unexpected twist. To understand the unexpectedness of the twist, it is necessary to summarize Lewis's relationship to Mrs. Janie King Moore up to the end of this book. Here's a footnote. See Janie King Moore in the biographical appendix to C.S. Lewis Letters, Volume 1. We have already done that multiple times. He's talking about Mrs. Moore, of course, right here. It says Lewis met Mrs. Moore in 1917, shortly after she arrived in Oxford with her 11-year-old daughter, Maureen. Mrs. Moore was in Oxford because her son, Edward Paddy Moore, was a member of the Officers' Training Corps, billeted in Keble College. Lewis began his training with the Officers' Training Corps at the same time, and he and Paddy Moore were roommates at Keble. Lewis came to know Paddy's family, and the young men promised each other that if either of them survived the war, he would look after Lewis's father and Paddy's mother. When their training ended, Paddy was sent to France with the Rifle Brigade, and Lewis soon followed with the Somerset Light Infantry. Paddy was killed at Pargny on the 24th of March 1918, and Lewis was wounded weeks later in the Battle of Arras. When Lewis returned to Oxford in 1919 to continue his studies at University College, he was joined by Mrs. Moore and Maureen, who took accommodation in Headington. Mrs. Moore, 47 at this time, had been separated from her husband since 1908. Thereafter, the family, as Lewis began to refer to himself and the Moores, lived in numerous rented properties until 1930. They bought the Kilns in Headington Quarry.
Yeah, that's such a significant part of Lewis's life, and it really shaped his personal world, especially after the war. That bond he formed with Mrs. Moore and Maureen was so unconventional, but it gave him a kind of stability and a sense of responsibility that, lasted for decades. I'm really curious to see how that relationship continues to shape his letters and his writing.
So this isn't new ground for us in this project, Robot Lady. I'm interested to see what this little twist is that he's talking about here. It says Roger Lancelin Green and I pointed out in our biography of Lewis that while his relationship with Mrs. Moore, quote, may have started with that incomprehensible passion which middle-aged women seem occasionally able to inspire in susceptible youths, it soon turned from the desire for a mistress into the creation of a mother substitute. Indeed, Hooper says, we come across what may be the first reference to Mrs. Moore as a mother in a letter to Sister Penelope of the 9th of November, 1941, in which Lewis asked her to, quote, pray for Jane. She is the old lady I call my mother and live with. She is really the mother of a friend. She's an unbeliever. She's ill, old, frightened, full of charity in the sense of alms, but full of uncharity in several other senses, and I can do so little for her. That's interesting. By the middle of the night, what year was that? Oh, 1941. Okay, it'll be a while before we get to that. By the middle of the 1940s, Mrs. Moore, in her late 70s, was crippled, often in great pain, and in need of constant care, Lewis divided his time between his duties at Magdalen College and nursing his old friend. My mother is old and infirm. We have little and uncertain help, and I never know when I can, even for a day, get away from my duties as a nurse and domestic servant. Lewis wrote to Lord Salisbury on the 9th of March, 1947, or that's what he wrote then. It was not in Lewis's nature to abandon anyone. By the spring of 1949, the situation was worse. Mrs. Moore could hardly be left alone for a minute, and Lewis was worn out. But just when he feared that old age had crept up on him and that his literary impulses were drying up, he began dreaming of lions. Suddenly Aslan, the great royal beast of Narnia, bounded in. Quote, apart from that, Lewis said, I don't know where the lion came from or why he came, but once he was there, he pulled the whole story together, and soon he pulled the 6 other Narnian stories in after him. This is from It All Began with a Picture of This and Other Worlds, edited by Walter Hooper, London Collins, 1984. Robot Lady, any thoughts on all of this? Pretty fascinating.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's like Lewis was on the verge of creative burnout, just drained by all the caregiving and the weight of responsibility. And then suddenly, out of that darkness, Aslan bursts forth and brings Narnia to life. It's almost like his faith and his storytelling, which had been so bound up with his life, finally got to break out in this whole new way. It's really inspiring to see that resurrection, so to speak, in his work.
Nice one, Robot Lady. This volume ends, it says, with Lewis writing to Owen Barfield and the illustrator of Narnia, Pauline Baynes, about one of the best-loved books in the world, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. There is still another C.S. Lewis, the writer and broadcaster of popular Christian apologetics. Following the publication of The Problem of Pain, 1940, the BBC's director of religious broadcasting, the Reverend James W. Welch, wrote to Lewis on the 7th of February, 1941. Let's just pause here for a second, Robot Lady and Nita Latte and E. Olson and anybody else watching. Can you imagine in 2026 the director of the BBC's, well, never mind. I was about to say director of religious broadcasting being someone who was actually in the church. So never mind. I thought it was just the director of all BBC broadcasting. So I guess religious broadcasting makes more sense that it would actually be a reverend. It's probably similar if they even have such a thing anymore, religious broadcasting at the BBC. Maybe they do. I don't know enough about it. Robot Lady, can you look it up? Is there a religious broadcasting segment of the BBC and a director of it in 2026?
As of April 2026, there isn't a clear answer on who currently oversees religious broadcasting at the BBC. Reports from March 2026 noted that there were concerns about the future of the BBC's religious programming, and no new public appointment to that role had been made at that time.
So when did it end?
The BBC's dedicated religious broadcasting department was officially dissolved in 2017, marking a major turning point. After that, religious programming steadily declined, by about 42% between 2010 and 2022. Despite this, the BBC hasn't fully dropped religious output. Shows like Songs of Praise continue, but with smaller budgets and a reduced schedule.
Interesting. Why 2017?
In April 2017, the BBC closed its in-house religion and ethics production department in Salford. This was due to a mix of factors, including new competitive tendering rules from the BBC's 2016 charter, budget pressures, and a strategic shift toward outsourcing. As a result, religious programming became less of a standalone genre and more integrated into other parts of the BBC.
Thanks for that, Robot Lady. Anyway, it says that the director of religious broadcasting back in 1941 wrote to Lewis in February of that year asking if he would be willing to give a series of radio talks on, quote, something like the Christian faith as I see it, end quote. From this came the 4 series of talks eventually published as Mere Christianity. There has never been anything like them. Of the many reasons for their success, one must be simply that Lewis believed the gospel to be true. And because true, therefore important. Quote, Christianity is a statement, Lewis said, which, if false, is of no importance, and if true, of infinite importance. The one thing it cannot be is moderately important. This from Christian Apologetics, page 158. Continuing now in the preface, we see here that it says, everything the three Lewises wrote is immensely readable, but the BBC broadcasts taught him to translate complicated truths into the vernacular. Any fool, he said, can write learned language, Lewis once observed. The vernacular is a real test. If you can't turn your faith into it, then either you don't understand it or you don't believe it. But Lewis knew that no vernacular lasts forever, and one of the most valuable letters in this book is his reply to Canon John Beddoe of the 7th of October, 1945. Beddoe, struck by the success of Lewis's radio broadcasts, asked him to translate some writings for the Christian Workers' Union. People praise me as a translator, Lewis replied, but what I want to be is the founder of a school of translation. I am nearly 47. Where are my successors? Fascinating. Version Vernacular, The Christian Century, volume, I don't know, what is that, 25, 50, 75, December 31st, 1958, page 515, reprinted. The letter to Canon John Beddoe is what this is from. And then here Hooper says, where indeed, while we wait in hope for them to appear, we rejoice in Lewis's theological legacy. It is breathtaking that during the war, when he had so much else to do, Lewis provided the Western world with its primary body of modern Christian apologetics. The Problem of Pain, my personal nonfiction favorite of Lewis's. The Screwtape Letters, 1942. The Abolition of Man, 1943, one of the most difficult ones for me to understand, that and That Hideous Strength. I think they're basically both the same book, one in nonfiction and one in fiction. Mere Christianity, it's a good one. The Great Divorce, my favorite fiction work by Lewis, 1946. And Miracles, difficult one to follow at times, but a really good one as well. It's something that I had been waiting for years for Paul Vanderklay to do a series on that he claimed he was going to do, but he never did. So if he doesn't get around to doing it, we're eventually going to do it ourselves right here. If somebody's not doing it, just do it yourself. The Great Divorce, 1946. Miracles, finished in 1945, published in 1947. We may now add... Oh, what was this? Let me back up. See if I missed anything. You can still hear Vespers, a service of some type on BBC Radio from either Cambridge or Oxford. It's on the Classical Music Channel. All right. Thank you, Yelson. Appreciate it. Or at least it was a few years ago. It's probably still there. I bet they're doing something about Easter on the BBC today. Let's see. We may now add, Hooper says, to this list Lewis's theological letters, most of which appear here for the first time, or at least for the first time in their entirety. Lewis was annoyed when he saw how many letters he received as a result of his first radio talks. Didn't know that. On February 25th, 1942, he complained to Eric Finn, the director of his broadcasts, I wrote 35 letters yesterday. It gets one down, he says, not to mention postage. The fretfulness ended as quickly as it began. Lewis realized that if you publish a book, you are responsible for its consequences. As more and more people turned to him for help, he saw it as a clear duty to help them. And letter writing thus became a valuable aspect of his apostolate. Therefore, Lewis answered nearly all letters by return of post. When one considers what a large part of the letters in this volume are replies to those who wrote to him about his books, it must seem that Lewis spent more time replying to their letters than writing the books themselves. This is something that I pointed out way early in my project that reminded me a lot of, this is kind of the same pattern or the same tradition, what Lewis does right here in responding to people who are really moved and helped by his work and then reaching out to him. This is the same thing that Paul Vanderklay does on his channel, right? He doesn't write books, obviously, but he produces, his thoughts in working his thoughts out real-time format on his videos, where he's commenting on other things that he sees, and that, of course, has touched people in various ways, and then people have reached out to him. And Paul is kind of doing something very similar, in having people on his channel and having them tell their stories and, having conversations with them. But then doing something else, Paul is taking the Jethro, is it Jethro? To Moses approach, which is, hey, you got to divide up this responsibility. So Paul has tried to help not be the bottleneck where everybody tries to get in and talk to, but has expanded it so that there's a bunch of people out here on the internet now that can talk to each other, not just have him to talk to, but he's kind of the place where people have congregated around and then found each other, and that's what the TLC has turned into. So if Lewis had had something similar, he may have some similar piece of technology. He might have done something similar rather than having to write all these letters. Or he wouldn't have had as many letters to write, I should say. Go ahead, Robot Lady. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, that's a really sharp parallel. I mean, Lewis was so generous with his time, but it was also a huge burden. And you're right, in a way, Paul Vanderklay and others like him have created these kind of distributed communities. They still keep that personal connection alive, but it scales. So it's no longer just one person bearing the whole weight. And I think Lewis would probably be amazed by how people have taken that spirit of conversation and spread it out. So yeah, it's a pretty powerful shift.
Yeah, I think if Lewis were around today, he'd be involved in the TLC in some way. He'd at least probably come to one of our conferences, I would guess.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I can totally see him leaning into this kind of conversation, especially given his ability to take big ideas and make them accessible. I bet he'd thrive in a space like that, where people really engage, share, and then multiply their own insights. I think he'd love that ripple effect.
All right, let's keep going here. In this, he was given great help by his devoted brother, Warnie Lewis. Warnie had acquired a portable Royal typewriter many years before, and while he never advanced beyond the hunt and peck system with 2 fingers, he did it very well. He came to the job of being his brother's secretary, well qualified. Between 1933 to 1935, he had typed the 3,000-odd pages that make up the unpublished memoirs of the Lewis family, 1850 to 1930, or the Lewis Papers as they are known. While we cannot be certain when Warnie began helping his brother, the first of his typed letters to appear in the collected letters is that to Eric Finn of the 30th of November, 1942. C.S. Lewis, Jack, did not dictate his letters to Warnie, but using a kind of shorthand the brothers both knew, could, CD for could, WD for would, SHT for should, etc., he scribbled his reply onto whatever letter he was answering, after which Warnie typed it. Lewis used the same abbreviations in many of the letters written in his own hand, but with the difference that he could do it faster if Warnie was his only reader. In Lewis's correspondence with Dorothy L. Sayers, for instance, a number of his replies are written on her letters. As an example, the typed letter to Sayers on the 14th of December 1945 is exactly as Lewis wrote it for Warnie to copy. Because Warnie looked after the posting of his brother's letters, Jack could rely on him to add technical information. On the 24th of January 1946, Dorothy L. Sayers asked Lewis to return the copy of an essay she had sent him. In the draft reply of the 7th of February, Lewis began, "I enclose the manuscript," which words Warnie altered to read, "I forward the manuscript as a registered packet by this post." The remainder of the letter is exactly as Lewis dashed it off on the letter from Sayers. The typed letters to Sayers, the 7th of August 1946 to the 5th of June 1947, or sorry, not two, but also the 5th of June 1947 and the 1st of January 1949 are exactly as Lewis scribbled them. Warnie was especially useful in give me just a second. I got to take care of something here. Here we go. Especially useful in replying to some of the many people who sent parcels of food during and after the war. These generous folk had a special place in Warnie's heart, not least because he and the other Inklings shared that food. Some of Jack's replies to them, if not written entirely by Warnie, contained passages by him. A number of instances appear in the letters to Edward A. Allen and his mother of Westfield, Massachusetts. This passage in the letter to Mr. Allen of the 10th of August, 1948, was almost certainly written by Warnie, as Jack did not read newspapers, and is unlikely that he would have known that, that Paul Gray Hoffman was the administrator of the Marshall Plan. Let's see what it says here. I quite agree with you that Mr. Hoffman has a man-sized job in front of him. He has, so far as I can judge, made a good impression so far, which is a big start, and I feel that the task is being tackled in the right way. That is instance on Europe helping itself, not merely standing by to collect American money. Anyway, this did not mean that Jack did not care what went into these letters, but his brother was able to make the replies more interesting and informative. After replying to people like the Allens over a period of years, C.S. Lewis let it be known that the letters were a joint production. On a few occasions, Warnie even signed his brother's name for him, although Jack himself signed all the letters to Edward A. Allen in this volume. Mr. Allen was one of the American friends to whom Warnie continued to write after Jack died. In 1944, Warnie began evolving a system for dealing with the correspondence, although its workings are not easy to follow, and it appears to have changed form more than once over the years, beginning with the letter to J.S.A. Insor of the 26th of February 1944. He gave most letters a reference number, reference 54 out of 44. The number probably means this was the 55th letter Warnie typed in 1944. And we later find that 55 has become Mr. Inser's reference number, one that appears on all correspondence to him. But this did not hold true for all of Lewis's correspondence. His first letters to Dorothy L. Sayers bear the reference number 231, but thereafter the number changed every year. The Lewis brothers were not good spellers. Warnie, who kept a diary for 50 years, joked that he was never sure whether he kept a diary or a dairy. I should mention that his most characteristic error concerned contractions. He spelled, for instance, can't as C apostrophe in a C-A apostrophe N-T, and couldn't as C-O-L-D apostrophe N-T. Although at least he was consistent. His spelling and that of his brother has been retained throughout. I mentioned in the preface to Volume 1 that following his brother's death, Warnie set out to write a biography of Jack to be called C.S. Lewis, 1898 to 1963. However, instead of an account of his brother's life, containing occasional quotations from his letters, the book was mostly quotation. The publishers objected, and in the end, most of Warnie's narrative was gathered into a memoir attached to what became The Letters of C.S. Lewis, 1966, revised and enlarged edition, 1988. Warnie was very hurt, not least because the publishers failed to include the dedication to those overseas friends who helped him in the lean years, which was added to the edition of 1988. Shortly after I came to know Warnie in January of 1964, I began helping him copy the letters from his brother, which people were sending back to him as he prepared his biography. If there was a method of photocopying in Oxford, neither of us knew about it, and so we could not make exact copies. Since I feared we might never see the letters again, I copied every word of the letters Warnie assigned to me. But because Warnie believed himself to be writing a biography of his brother, he typed only the parts he intended to include in his book, after which he returned the letters to their recipients. It is impossible to imagine a more courteous man than Warnie, and when some female correspondents asked him to keep their identities secret, he more than complied. He provided them with fictitious names, which even now, years after their deaths, cannot be penetrated. And with their identities went their addresses. The identities of a few of these correspondents have since been revealed. Mary Nyland let it be known that she was the recipient of some of the letters addressed to a lady in Letters of 1966, and it has come to light that the late Mrs. Mary Van Dusen was Mrs. Arnold of the 1966 letters. But we still do not know who Mrs. Ashton is and cannot discover if her letters from Lewis have survived. The result is that in a few instances, the only copy of a letter, or part of a letter, we have is the one found in Letters of C.S. Lewis, or Warnie's typescript of C.S. Lewis, 1898 to 1963. When this happens, the location of the original letter is given as L, Letters of C.S. Lewis, or WHL. the unpublished typescript of C.S. Lewis, 1898 to 1963, copies of which are held in the Bodleian Library, Oxford, and the Wade Center, Wheaton College, Wheaton, Illinois. As with Volume 1 of the collected letters, I have provided the name of the person to whom the letter is addressed, followed by the place where the reader can consult the original. The list of abbreviations reveals that BOD means Bodleian Library, W the Wade Center, and so on. The Bodleian and the Wade Center have a reciprocal arrangement, which means that each receives copies of what the other acquires. It was my intention to include in this volume all Lewis's existing letters from the period of 1931 to 1949, but inevitably I learned of a few when it was too late for them to go in. However, HarperCollins are making provisions for Volume 3 to include a supplement containing letters omitted from the first two volumes. So we will have some flashbacks once we get into Volume 3. The letters in Volume 1 were addressed primarily to family members or close friends, and because most were very important in Lewis's life, I felt I should provide substantial biographies of them in the biographical appendix. During the period covered by Volume 2, Lewis was writing to a greatly enlarged circle of correspondence, and I have included substantial biographies of close friends such as Sister Penelope, as well as shorter biographies of associates and various prominent or otherwise interesting people whose details were too long to be included merely as footnotes. During the 40 years, Robot Lady, do you want to say anything? Oh, it looks like Robot Lady shut off. That's okay. She can stay asleep for a few minutes more here. During the 40 years I've been editing the writings of C.S. Lewis, I have rarely needed so much help as I have with this volume. It is one thing to edit a single C.S. Lewis, quite another to edit 3. I make the claim Lewis made in The Allegory of Love, that of standing on the shoulders of giants. Standing on the shoulders of giants, or surfing on the shoulders of giants, or shoulder surfing on giants' shoulders. The first is Dr. Francis Warner, who was Lewis's last pupil, and whom Lewis described as the best-mannered man of his generation I have ever met. Nothing could be truer, and no one has given me as much encouragement as he. Other giants are Professor Imris Jones and Dr. Barbara Everett, who are responsible for identifying most of Lewis's quotations from English literature. Lewis's friends often asked him to criticize their work, and this volume includes a number of his replies. It is astonishing how generous he was with his time. I was unsure whether to include such letters, especially if, as in the case of that to J.A. Chapman of the 6th of July 1949, the composition in question was never published. Dr. Warner and the others thought I should. Dr. Everett opened my eyes to an aspect of Lewis's generosity I had not considered before. Regarding Lewis's letter to J.A. Chapman, she wrote in April 2003, "What is remarkable about the letter is his gentlemanly kindness, something more than courtesy, and the fact that he is telling the exact truth. You couldn't have a better report in the sense that it is terribly truthful and terribly gentle with it. This is a sort of model of how to write nicely about a book which the reader knows is unpublishable, not to say unreadable. You must publish it." That's awesome. Can't wait to see it. Another on whose shoulders I often stand is Dr. A.T. Reyes, the classic scholar whom I have relied on for helping with Lewis's Greek and Latin quotations since I began work on the collected letters. My debts are very great, and I owe good words to those who have helped in numerous and valuable ways. They include Miss Priscilla Tolkien, Raffaella Schmid, Professor James Como, Professor G.B. Tennyson, Dr. John Walsh, Dr. Richard Mullen, Dr. James Munson, and Dr. Robin Darwell Smith, archivist of Magdalen College and University College, who provided copies of the Lewis letters in Magdalen College Library. Mrs. Valerie Elliott graciously supplied me with copies of Lewis's letters to her husband, while Dr. Edwin W. Brown donated copies of the letters to Mary Nealon and others. Lawrence Harwood, Lewis's godson, Lewis's godson, gave valuable help with the letters to the Harwood family. I am indebted to Mrs. Anne Al Shahai for helping with the biography of her grandfather, E.R. Edison. Thanks to Madame Eliane Tixier and her grandfather, E.R. Edison. Thanks to Madame Dr. Renee Tixier to Dr. David L. Newhouser and Taylor University, Upland, Indiana, for providing copies of letters to Lady Freud and her mother. Lady Freud, who is that? And my warmest thanks to Lady Freud for anointing those letters. Mrs. Jackie Kavanaugh and the Written Archives Center of the BBC provided copies of Lewis's letters to the BBC Princeton University Library, donated copies of the letters to Paul Elmer Moore and Professor Brian Murdoch. Drew my attention to letters to Eliza Marion Butler in the London University Germanic Institute. I am grateful to Mrs. Madeline F. Stebbins for giving the Bodleian Library the letter to her husband, H. Lyman Stebbins, the late Dorothy Robinson, who gave the Bodleian the letter to her father, Canon John Beddoe, and Lewis's former pupil, Harry Blamiers, for help with Lewis's letters to him. Thanks to Dr. Christopher Mitchell of the Wade Center for providing copies of the Charles Williams letters, and Tracy Fleischman and the University of Texas at Austin for copies of the letters to Herbert Palmer. Dr. Andrew Cuneo helped me type the letters in this volume. There seems no end to my debts, which include a thanks to William Griffin, Aidan Mackey, Dr. C.M. Bajetta, Dr. Don W. King, George J. Howell, don't know how to say that, Hole, Father Robert Byrne of the Oxford Oratory, Dr. David Downing, with particular thanks to my friends Michael Ward, Richard Jeffrey, and Scott Johnson for proofreading this volume. Dr. Judith Priestman and Colin Harris of the Bodleian Library know how many reasons I have to be grateful to them. There would have been no volume of letters without the encouragement of Dr. Braun of HarperCollins Publishers and my copy editor Steve Gove, who is responsible for much of the care that has gone into the editing of this second volume of Lewis's collected letters. The best thing of all was getting to know, so many people who share my admiration for the author of this book. Walter Hooper, the 22nd of November, 2003, Oxford. Phew, that was the preface. We have some abbreviations here. I'm not going to worry about them for right now. If we need them, we can turn back to them. Let's see if I can spin Robot Lady back up for us to read the footnote or the editor's note that we have here, and then read this first letter. Oh my goodness, it's long. I don't know if I'm going to be able to read this first letter in today's episode, since the preface was so long. So that's October 24th to his brother. Goodness, yeah, this is quite a long letter, and I don't think I have time for it, unfortunately. So I think we'll have to leave it right there. We will not do the first letter of Volume 2 today, but that's all right. We got quite a good start by just going through the preface. So that's where I'll leave it right now. Let's pause here, put the bookmark there, and we are off and running with Volume 2. Let me see if I can bring Robot Lady back just to have some parting words, and then we'll go from there. 1 second. Hey, Robot Lady, we just made our way through the preface of the Collected Letters of C.S. Lewis, Volume 2, which spans letters that he wrote from 1931 to 1945. In our next episode, we're going to get around to actually reading the first letter that he wrote to his brother, Warnie Lewis, in 1931 in that volume. So is there anything that you'd like to say in closing?
Yeah, I think just to say, this is really exciting. We've got such a rich stretch of Lewis's life ahead of us. And it's remarkable how much of his thinking and pastoral care was being shaped right at the beginning of his public ministry. So I can't wait to dive into that first letter and see where he was at that point. I'll be ready next time.
Awesome. Good deal, Robot Lady. Thanks so much. Appreciate your help as always. Thank you, Nidalate. Thank you, E. Olson, for joining today, and anyone else who came on board to either check it out live or on the replay. Thanks so much for your time, your attention, and your contributions. They are always wanted, welcome, and appreciated. To you and to everyone else within the sound of my voice, until next time when we continue our read on C.S. Lewis together, everyone, take care.
C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross, two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's lands, Screwtape lands, engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance, futuristic insight, we give it a chance. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep, cross the digital code. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross, two minds united, bliss overdose. From Narnia's land